George. Hi, everyone. It's very nice to be with you. Thank you for having me. I am your County Transportation Authority Director by day, but I'm here in my personal capacity so that I can play the role of the proponent here. I wanted to start by also just saying that the campaign that I'm representing is the yes on whatever the measures letter will be, but it's the Better Roads and Transit campaign. The proposal is to extend our current half-cent transportation sales tax for another 30 years. So you may or may not know that we've had this since 1989 when it was first created by voters. And our agency, the San Francisco County Transportation Agency, has been managing it over these 30 years. And we're governed by the Board of Supervisors, as you know, the 11 members. They are our board, and they oversee and decide how the funds are used according to the expenditure plan that the voters approved. Now, after it was first established in '89, it was reauthorized in 2003. And that was 7 years ahead of when the original measure was going to expire, because the major projects in that first plan, which were the Embarcadero roadway, after taking down the freeway, and some other major investments, those were already completed. So in 2003, I actually started in 2003, George. So I've been around for almost 20 years. And that measure was timed in year 13 because, again, other projects were coming along, namely the transit center downtown to replace the old dilapidated bus terminal, and then the idea of bringing Caltrain and high-speed rail into the basement. Doyle Drive, which we did replace on time and on budget, and now has a beautiful Tunnel Tops Park above it. I hope you have a chance to visit. In addition, electrification of Caltrain, which is about to open, then SBRT that just opened, the Geary BRT, and then Central Subway. All the major projects from the 2003 plan are completed or about to be opened. Now we have a whole new generation of projects, large and small, that we are trying to get funded. And because there has been a recent historic infrastructure bill, the timing is critical. Not only to take advantage of that and put up the new projects for grants and have a local sales tax to provide local match, but also because some categories in this current measure did accelerate their spending. And that includes traffic calming. That includes paratransit for seniors and disabled folks, because during the pandemic, there was a high need for paratransit services, and a few other categories as well. So our hope now is to use this time to establish a whole new expenditure plan that would supersede the current plan, and then extend the sales tax 30 years to implement the new plan. It's $2.6 billion of capital, mostly capital improvements for every mode of transportation, whether you're a driver, whether you're a transit rider, whether you're a cyclist or pedestrian. And the idea is to leverage those funds again 7 to 10 times. Now, the plan was shaped by a 27-person community group, and they unanimously endorsed this. And we want to make sure that we have a broad coalition of support. We're seeking your support here. The neighborhoods are where a lot of the spending happens. Supervisor Safai has put all his money on traffic calming. Three districts came together and put funds on Mansell. We repaved 19th Avenue and put pedestrian signals and countdown signals up and down 19th Avenue, and we're developing a citywide, set of bus and bike networks as well. So we have hopefully a broad-based expenditure plan, and I would really appreciate your consideration. I know there's just 1 minute left. I guess I'll just end by saying some of the bread and butter things that we need are escalators and elevators in our transit stations. And we also have human beings now in the elevators, in the Bart Muni elevators downtown, which really helps, I think, to give people a sense of security. So some of that funding is also eligible in the new plan as well. A lot of quality of life improvements, lighting, streetscapes, benches for the commercial corridors and the businesses and merchants that are needing our support. So economic recovery and job creation is another co-benefit of this plan, in addition to improving our safety and accessibility for the whole city, neighborhoods and downtown together. Thank you for your time, and happy to answer questions.
What we'll do is we'll hear from Mr. Marceau, and then you guys will have joint questions thrown at you. So Larry, are you ready, Charles?
Yes, starting.
Well,
Okay.
before you start the timer, I would like to make sure my audio is working at acceptable to everyone.
Loud and clear.
All right, great. Let's get going. Thank you. So thank you. I am here tonight to urge a vote no on early reauthorization of Proposition K from 2003. And I want to emphasize, this is early reauthorization. This should not be on the ballot this year. The sales tax already runs for 10 more years. There is some dishonest marketing going on here, not from Tilly. Thank you, Tilly. But the sales tax already goes on for 10 more years, and a new expenditure plan is unnecessary. In every annual financial report, the language that you will see right above me, that the Transportation Authority Board has the authority after 20 years, which is 2023, to rewrite the plan without going back to the voters. This authorizes issuing 30-year revenue bonds in the amount of $1.91 billion in the aggregate. Do you know that the entire borrowing of San Francisco is short of $3 billion, including general obligation bonds and certificates of participation? This is a pattern, this early reauth pattern of going back to the voters to reauthorize and extend the sales tax, is maxing out the credit card and seeking a higher credit limit. Take a look at this. I offer you the spur argument in favor of Proposition K. Now, here it is, half-cent sales tax, and 20% of the total needed would attract 80% in matching federal grants, a 5-to-1 multiple. Well, guess what? This is the marketing for the 2003 Proposition K. Well, I'm afraid, we can ask Tilly, but this was not a 5-to-1 multiple on the 2003 sales tax. You could take a look at the kind of performance here with the Yerba Buena Island project here in the amount of $8 million in the aggregate, which is the major program that you see throughout the 2000s. The sales tax is regressive. Most of it, about 3/5 of it, comes from food and grocery and industries and bars here in the city of San Francisco. The voters rejected in 2016 a plan to increase the sales tax to fund transportation, and the SFCTA went out and borrowed $270 million against the remaining years of this Proposition K to go out and fund the programs the voters had just rejected anyway. Proposition A did not pass. The city has to go back and seriously re-examine the plans for the post-pandemic era. There's all this talk of the infrastructure plan, but Secretary Buttigieg in the 2023-24 budget rejected San Francisco's proposals, has not chosen to include them, I should say, in the selected programs. There's no guarantee that next year, in the next year's Congress, that the programs will continue to receive funding. It is subject to further congressional review. And by the way, the $550 billion of the infrastructure budget is not inflation adjusted. there are now estimates with the price of steel increasing by 25% and other elements of the infrastructure bill. There is now the estimate that it's already lost 1/3 or more of its value. Well, and thank you so much. I look forward to tonight's questions. I appreciate the invitation.
Okay. George?
Well, where to start? I
Clock's
would
starting now.
start by asking both of you, how similar is the SFMTA Prop A bond to the SFCTA proposal? What elements do they share? One was just defeated, and both bonds need a 2/3 majority. And I'm curious. I'll ask you, Tilly.
Sure.
You
Yeah, thanks for the question. The Prop A bond is $400 million property tax. It was for mostly muni and MTA street safety projects. Our measure is 6 times the size of the MTA bond. It's $2.6 billion. And it covers not only city investments like muni and safe streets, it also covers BART and Caltrain ferry, as well as freeway investments. So a lot more regional, not just local investments, as well as funds for public works and PUC and other infrastructure departments. Imagine the seawall, imagine the Ocean Beach Master Plan and resilience and climate change. And so we have a broader scope. We also do traffic signals and traffic calming and road resurfacing. That's public works, I think I mentioned. I'll also know that it's been a PAYGO program for the 30 years up until 2017. As Larry mentioned, we did take our very first bond out, and it was for the Muni Siemens vehicles to replace the Bredas. I think they've been universally sort of accepted, and people are enjoying the new vehicles. Muni really needed to replace them. And so we've actually used the K to pay for all the rubber tire fleet, the bus fleet replacements until 2017 as a PAYGO program. So this bonding capacity is $250 million, and it's completely affordable, and there's no problem. We're not going to go anywhere near the $1.9 billion that Larry mentioned.
Thank you, Tilly. Larry.
Behind me is the marketing material for this as yet, unlabeled sales tax expenditure plan. This is the 1/2-cent sales tax. Look at this marketing. It's the same marketing as Proposition A: transit, streets and traffic safety, paratransit operations. It looks like an effort to continue the same programs and the same priorities that the voters just rejected. I do acknowledge there are regional elements here, but the regional elements have their own alternative funding plans and strategies, including their own access to borrowing that is not a regressive sales tax. Again, just please take a moment and look and ask yourself, is this not familiar? We have not yet seen the yes on this campaign get underway, but we all just went through the marketing for Proposition A. And is this not the same marketing? I ask our audience, distinguished audience tonight.
Well, thank you. I'm gonna go, Al.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious. Things have changed, right, since the pandemic, and I don't know if people are even commuting all that much anymore regionally, and I'm not even sure. I mean, this is gonna sound facetious, but do we even need Caltrain anymore? I mean, except to go to the ball game?
Yes, we do. May I answer that? Or is that for me? I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah, no.
Thanks. So
Please.
I think we certainly do, Al. It's for BART, it's for Caltrain, it's for Muni. Caltrain does have low ridership. I think Muni's come back the best out of all of them, but also BART has come back pretty well. We are seeing traffic. It was in the Chronicle this week already coming back to peak pre-COVID levels. Now, Muni over the past several years has been refashioning their lines, right, to be not so downtown oriented, to be more neighborhood oriented. So that's one way that they've adjusted, but people really rely on transit. Not everyone feels comfortable taking it, and that's okay. So we got to make sure that we're planning for the traffic as well. But we can't have a healthy recovery if everyone drives. And so we're planning also for the next 100 years, not the next 5. So these programs are meant to last, 15 years or so, to pull down infrastructure projects that are going to serve our city for generations.
George, that's been 5 minutes. You want one more time period?
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
When you're planning for 100 years, take a beat. These are pre-pandemic plans. These plans were not fundamentally restructured to adapt and retool transit to adjust for work from home, population in San Francisco on the decline, reduced commutes, ridership and tourism, and in particular, to have some possibility for a lower sales tax rate in the future in the city of San Francisco. This program commits us to a 0.5-cent sales tax for the next 30 years. And think about it in this way. This is the largest single tax increase, I believe, and this is perhaps off the top of my head, correct me if I'm wrong, but for a 30-year period, a 0.5-cent sales tax, raising $2.6 billion, put that alongside any other tax measure in the history of San Francisco. I mean, the sales tax for the last 30, for 2003, certainly hasn't raised that level of revenue. And, frankly, I don't think this will raise that level of revenue given the potential decline in the economy here. But this is not a plan that has taken into account the potential recession, the need for fundamental restructuring of our tax code here in the city of San Francisco, for the possibility that economic activity will relocate throughout not just San Francisco, but throughout the Bay Area. What we're building, we're planning to borrow to build heavy infrastructure for the pre-pandemic era. Take a beat. It's a tragedy that if 2 measures to fund mass transit are rejected back to back here in the city of San Francisco, but it is perhaps a necessary tragedy for the voters to communicate this important message to City Hall and our leadership.
May I respond?
Okay, Mary, please. She's had her hand up a long time.
Hi, thanks. I had a couple of questions, and I don't know if you have answers for them. Basically, when did housing become a transit priority? Why are we building housing on top of Muni as part of the process that Muni's involved in? And why are we spending so much money moving rail lines from one place where they are now to another where they're not? That seems like a waste of taxpayer dollars. And those are the kind of issues I think that may be turning the taxpayers off. Then I have another one, which I think is more about my concerns about rail and the priorities for rail. Why are we spending so much effort trying to get people to take the trains when the trains that we really need right now are the trains that are moving the food or should be moving the food to the ships so they can be loaded and exported. And that goes for all the supply chain. The supply chain is broken, and the rail is for that supply chain. It seems like it's not getting as much attention as my taking the rail or taking the bus or something in the city. And that's my question sort of to you. Whoever wants to take that.
Okay, I'll try to take that.
Priorities.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. For the Muni Potrero Yard project, that is a 100-year-old facility that does not even have pneumatic lifts for the vehicles. It needs to be rebuilt. Muni has agreed to partner with the housing, Mayor's Office of Housing to try and put some housing on top of that facility. However, if that housing does not materialize in time or that financing does not work out, Muni has an off-ramp to build its yard anyway, because that's the priority. The funding is there using our sales tax as well and their own money to rebuild the Potrero yard. It's a really important bus yard, whether the housing works out or not. But they thought, why not go ahead and try? Because the housing has its own funds, and if it can work out together, great. If it doesn't work out, Muni has the option to basically proceed with its project without the housing. Regarding the rail lines, I'm not really understanding. We don't have freight rail here in San Francisco. It's mostly in the East Bay serving the port. So I don't understand. I'm also not aware of where the rail lines are being moved, but that would be an MTA kind of, I believe, technical rationale for doing so. I believe I answered those questions. And I do want to maybe take a moment to address Larry's questions. Prop A didn't pass, and that's a shame. And our sales tax is not increasing. It is maintaining its half-cent level. The current San Francisco sales tax, by the way, is 8.625%. It's quite modest relative to our neighboring counties and everyone else in the state. You might be surprised that many cities and counties are actually at 10% or more. Alameda has 2 half pennies for transportation. San Mateo has now 2 half pennies for transportation. Santa Clara has 4 half pennies because they really want to bring BART to San Jose, and they've taxed themselves 4 times. Los Angeles also has 4 half pennies. So I happen to be the chair of the Self-Help Counties Coalition, which is the 25 counties that have voted to tax themselves for transportation. And I can tell you that we are falling behind. And if we don't actually renew this measure now, we cannot wait till 2023, Larry, to do this other method. We will miss the window to take advantage of this Congress, this Speaker, this White House, and pull down infrastructure grants for San Francisco to help our recovery and our competitiveness and our quality of life.
George, you're past 20 minutes.
Okay, I have a few more speakers. Do people find this topic of interest or no? I see Thomasita has the last, I'll give her the last word. I have a question, but not to be rude, I think she's had her hand up a long time. And sorry, Charles, we'll just end after her question.
Thomasita, unmute yourself.
Thank you. Tilly, you mentioned, okay, I want to know, does this include slow streets? Because slow streets have been imposed all over the city, and they make people go all around in the streets, and their gasoline gets sprayed all over the city because slow having to go around the slow streets is oppressive to the people, especially when you don't and consult the neighbors whose streets you're going to close. And you mentioned slow streets as part of what's being funded. This is part of my question.
I said safe streets, safe streets.
Okay, well, safe street. What's the difference between safe streets and slow streets?
Well, that's also it's subject to the decision of our board to allocate any particular grant. Now, of course, a safe street could be the Mission to Geneva improvements. It could be the 19th Avenue, crosswalks and signals and pedestrian crossings and bulb outs. It could be a whole bunch of things. Now, slow streets is a very specific type of improvement, and there have been some slow streets, I think, that have been proposed. But I believe we've only funded neighborways, and that was like on 20th Avenue in District 4. Slow streets is something that is eligible, absolutely would be eligible, but it would require 6 votes at my board to be able to fund it. And as you may know, that our board was divided on the JFK closure. It was a 7-4 vote. And so that's just how things go. The point is these buckets have funding for each type of improvement, and it's up to the board, and every 5 years we do plans to keep up with the, what's happening at that time in order to prioritize the funds to specific uses within each category.
Well, the neighbor ways is just another make work project. You guys keep coming up with new things like Geary Bus Rapid Transit, Van Ness Bus Rapid Transit Mission, which are oppressive to the businesses. They put little businesses out, they take out the trees, they take out the bus stops. So elderly people have to try to walk 4 blocks between bus stops instead of 2, just for the convenience, so that the workers, the little tech workers, can get downtown faster. And so the SFCTA has come across to me as a very oppressive organization that just makes these decisions, and it's all to advance the gentrification of our city instead of to make it good for the little people in the neighborhood.
Okay,
That's enough, yeah.
George,
that was,
George, may I just have a couple of
no,
minutes?
you,
Yeah.
because you're second, you have final word, then we're done.
Well, I want to make the point that it is not falling behind for San Francisco's citizens and voters to decide to have a lower sales tax. And I want to, dispute the notion that this is simply maintaining sales tax and nothing is going to change. The authority to borrow here expands dramatically. And to borrow dramatically more while keeping the sales tax the same is like continuing to make the same minimum payment on your credit card while increasing the credit limit and borrowing enormously more funds. Now, okay,
30 minutes.
San Francisco has has a good credit rating and can continue to borrow and before hurting its credit rating. Now, I don't know if this will continue to be true in recessionary times. We don't really know if the pandemic is over, but consider here that we just rejected authorizing, the general obligation bond, Proposition A. This is enormous authorization to borrow. And just because the underlying funding mechanism doesn't change, remember that. And let's talk about just quickly the federal programs. I showed you the marketing. Spur talked about it even back in 2003. The federal grants are going to multiply the money here. Was the marketing back then? It was false marketing back then. And in these inflationary times, with a dramatic federal deficit, with inflation, with a federal infrastructure program that is not inflation adjusted, with the components hit like steel, prices rising dramatically. It's false marketing again. Nothing in these programs requires that the local match be regressive sales taxes. And, I don't think we need here to commit ourselves to pour concrete to make slow streets permanent, which was a component of Proposition A and will be a component of the continued spending funded by the sales tax here, passed through by the SFCTA. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank both of you. You're both wonderful advocates of your position. And I know it's Friday night and you both had other things to do. So I greatly appreciate you coming. You're welcome to stay and watch other debates. When it comes time to vote on what we prefer, what we don't, everybody has to go except the basic membership, but you're welcome to stay if you like. So let's see.
Thank you, George.
I have to
Thank you,
find,
everyone.
oh, Bye, Tilly. Bye, Larry.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate you. Bye.
Take care.
Thanks to both of you.
Let's see.
Appreciate it. Appreciate the invitation.
Oh no, we're glad to have you anytime. Claire Zervansky. I think
I did manage to join on my phone. Thank you.
thank goodness. I was getting worried that you wouldn't be here.
Me too. Thanks, George.
So because what Claire has to say, she's a proponent argument for the retiree supplemental cost of living adjustment retirement board contract with executive director. She was also, I believe, the head of that entire, well, you can say what you were, Claire. I'm not quite, you ran everything for a long time there. So I think you're in a great position to talk about it. And just secondhand, Asha, Bill Barnes called and they had time to talk, but only at 6:30 and we didn't have time for them. But for the different
That's
measure.
okay. That's okay.
So we're counting on you to bring it home here
Okay.
on retiree supplemental costs of
Yeah.
living.
Thank
Your
you.
5 minutes
Okay.
starts now.
Starting now?
Yes, your 5
Yeah.
minutes starts now.
Yeah.
Okay. This charter amendment is for a small group of retirees. We started out with 8,700 of them. About 5 years ago, we're down to 4,300. We lose about 50 a month. These are all people who retired prior to November 6, 1996. So they worked for the city before we even had Social Security. They make mostly under 20 or 25,000 a year. This cost of living is capped. Anybody who makes, the few who make over 50,000 will not get it. But the rest of us sued the city and the retirement system to get our supplemental COLA back when Sean Ellsburn pulled it out with Prop C back in 2012. Was the first time that any benefits had been removed from city workers. And it's in the charter. It requires that our pension fund be at 100% funding, which doesn't happen all the time, and that it earn over 7.5% in returns. So we're not getting that this year because the returns were well under 7.5%, more like 1.5% returns on investment. I will tell you that while there is a figure in there that the controller had to come up with out of the general fund, it actually is part of the charter requirement for the controller to list that amount of money, but this amendment actually doesn't touch any general fund money. All payments come out of our pension system. Everybody who works in and for our pension system is paid out of our pension fund. There are no city dollars that go into this. It's all based on what we've contributed over the years. There is always, when you have pension systems, an employer contribution that goes in. And so to that extent, yeah, there are some city dollars in there, but that's a formula worked out. Was the city, the school districts and the Superior Court are employers, and those obligations come from their active contracts and the city charter. We anticipate that by January, there will be about 3,500 of our members left. They will not get a retroactive payment. They will only have their monthly stipend adjusted to reflect what they would get if they had won the lawsuit, which is a 5-year increment. We expect they might get up to $200 a month more in their income. If you're living in San Francisco and earning $20,000 or $25,000 a year, that means a lot. And as I said, they're not getting any kind of retroactive payment. There's only 3,500 out of the original 8,700 of them left because they're aging out. They're mostly over 80 or 85. Some of you actually know them from our neighborhoods out in the Excelsior. and the Sunset and the Richmond, because 45% of us still live in the city, but it's a small group, it's specialized, and the money is only paid out of our pension fund and not taking anybody else's money. So that's why we want it restored. The issue of the executive director really isn't a major part of this. The city attorney suggested that that phrase be added in. The board had already made its own decision regarding how it's hiring its people and in what way. And the city attorney said, our deputy city attorney said, oh, why don't you throw it in the charter? That way the permission is official so that the board can do that under the auspices of the city charter. But the board has that option regardless. And that's a different issue and doesn't really impact what's going on with the retirees. So any questions? And we would appreciate support everywhere we've gone so far. We've been getting support without any objection. So we would appreciate hearing that from CSFN as well.
Questions
Well,
start now.
Yeah, Mary Eliza has her hand up. She's always a good starting point.
I'm just confused about what you're asking the voters to vote on. Is it to vote on releasing your own money to you at a different pace?
It is about this group of retirees in their 80s who are dying off to have their cost of living, supplemental cost of living restored to them. It was voted in on November 6, 1996. It was taken away by Prop C in 2012. We sued, we got it back for everyone. The court told us to go back to the voters to see if they wanted to restore it to this oldest, poorest group. And yes, it's a matter of giving it so that the most we get is a 2% cost of living increase based on the charter language, and only when our fund earns over 7.5% rate of return on investments.
Okay,
This
you
would
didn't answer my
increase.
question. All I asked you was, is it
Yes,
releasing your own money? Yes. thank
yes, to this one specific group. The rest of us got it released through the court. Yes.
Okay, well, I have a question. I find this very interesting. Were there any unfunded mandates such as healthcare built into this?
No,
System?
No, this is
No,
only
nothing.
about restoring that. It's a 0.5%, 1%, or 1.5% supplemental COLA based on the excess earnings of our own pension fund. So we only get it when our pension fund earns over a certain amount of money and is over 100% funded. It's a rare time. It happened in the 90s. It's happened in 2015, 15, 16, and
Why,
17.
Claire,
Here's
why do
what
you
happened.
think this?
Let me explain to you. When we retire as city employees, the only thing that governs our benefits is the city charter. We no longer have contracts. We no longer get anything except what's stipulated in the charter. So if we want our benefits restored, or we want benefits, we have to go to the charter, and the voters have to give us those benefits. We don't have them any other way. And it was written that way, I think, because prior to about 1978 or 80, we were required to live in the city in order to work for the city. And then it was determined that that was unconstitutional. We couldn't be required to live in the city. So that's why it was originally written into the charter, and that's never changed.
Okay. More questions. Very interesting topic.
Yeah, we're
we
at the mercy of the voters of the city to get anything.
Well, of course, we should be thinking about helping elderly workers making $25,000 a year.
And you need to
even...
you need to understand this. There are some police and fire that are impacted, but basically not. The rest of us are called miscellaneous. And that is who is getting this. That's why the income is so low. Police and fire have different arrangements built in to their contracts and retirement system. The rest of us don't. So when you walk into any city office, who you see, the custodian that's sweeping the floor and polishing the floors in City Hall, person who's taking out the trash, the clerk at the window, those are all your miscellaneous employees. That's everybody else who isn't safety, who isn't police and fire.
Okay. All right. Any more questions? Well, that was a very good presentation. Well, thank you, Claire.
Thank you. Appreciate the
That
opportunity.
actually, oh yeah, that makes things, I understand a complex issue now. I didn't quite grasp.
And we look forward to hearing support, just so, in case you're wondering.
So,
Thank
well,
you.
I wanna, you're welcome. Thomasita, are you the one who's going to be talking about JFK tonight?
I guess so.
I thought so, because there was another woman's name sent over the email, but it looks like it's going to be you.
Then I think Ven might be her also. You could ask.
Oh, is it who? Is it Ben?
Ven,
No.
are you here to talk about it?
No, I'm just here for moral support.
Oh,
for
good,
Thomasita.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, okay.
We look forward to hearing from you, Thomasita.
We can all use moral support. All right.
Okay,
Well-
5 minutes starting now.
All right, so I'm Tomasita Medal, and I'm here to ask you to support reopening JFK Drive in Golden Gate Park and the Upper Great Highway to cars. And it's because we need to share the road. It's a question of accessibility and equity. Both of these roads were designed to transport people to a nature destination, as well as to transport, in the case of the Great Highway, to transport people north-south or south-north without impacting the nearby neighborhoods. Both of these roads have always had designated protected bicycle lanes, as well as designated protected pedestrian and jog lanes on either side of the main street, which had two-way traffic for cars. They served everybody. Then when Main Drive in Golden Gate Park was changed the name under Mayor Shelley in 1967 to JFK Drive, the road was closed to cars from 6 in the morning to 6 p.m. on Sundays and holidays. And it was like that for years, decades. And then we succeeded in having the Young Museum rebuild in Golden Gate Park, and people started demanding that the road be closed on Saturdays as well, only for daytime, from 6 in the morning to 6 p.m. And so we fought back because we felt that the working class should have at least one day of the weekend where they had full access to all the amenities along JFK Drive, because the road was closed to them on Sunday. So their only day left to them was Saturdays. So we fought, and we took it to the ballot, and there were two competing initiatives to close JFK Drive on Saturdays from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. One would be immediate, and the other would be when the garage was completed. Both were defeated by the voters. The people did not want Saturday road closure at all. But the bicycle advocates and the rollerblader group demanded that they kept demanding for Saturday road closure. So finally, there was negotiations that with the Park Access for All Coalition, of which I was the founder, and Mary Harris and her group were members, and so was the Coalition for San Francisco Neighbors. And this coalition, Park Access for All Coalition, negotiated a settlement agreement. We negotiated all night and all day. It included all the park institutions. And we came to an agreement where it would be closed, only half the road for half the year would be added. And that has been in effect since 2007, and it was fair. Well, if you want to let it, it wasn't exactly fair, but it was a compromise. And then the mayor used the excuse of the pandemic to close the road 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's been extremely oppressive, cruel, and mean to those of us with disabilities, the families with multi-generations from all over the city, including the Bayview, the Excelsior, anybody who needs a car to bring all their generations of family to the park, or in the case of Great Highway, to transport themselves to the VA, will say, if they're coming from the southern part of the city. And so we're asking to reopen the roads back to the way they were before the pandemic. That is what our simple petition is. Just go back to how it was before. Like the current Mime Troupe play says, is the title, The Way Things Were. That's what we're simply asking. Fairness and equity and accessibility for everyone. Share the roads. There's no way for the disabled and the elderly and families with multi-generations from other parts of the town or from elsewhere to have equal access without reopening the roads. If you want to ask me about the what the Rec and Park has so-called mitigation, you can ask me. But all I say is there's no equal access without reopening the road to cars. So those of us who need a car to get around and to transport our elders, are disabled ourselves. For myself as a disabled person, the only way I have independence is by being able to drive myself from here and there. So we need that human respect and that compassion for those who are vulnerable and for the multi-generational families. So please support reopening JFK Drive and oppose the initiative that was put on the ballot by the supervisors, Melgar, Ronan, Mandelman, and Dorsey to make the road closure permanent. Please oppose that. That was put as in response to our advocacy, our putting this, bring it to the people. The people who spoke up before and said, don't close the roads. We're asking you again, reopen the roads. Stick up for everybody. So there's equal access for everyone. Thank you.